All right, so, you sent us some pretty interesting stuff, and today we're diving right into chapter 3. It's titled The Unity of the Spirit.
Mm,
So
yeah.
consider this like your personal fast track to kind of like wrapping your head around some pretty big concepts about
Mm.
like the fundamental nature of reality.
Yeah.
Basically what we're aiming for is to really explore this whole idea of like a unity of the spirit, which is this
Yeah.
idea that the infinite is omnipresent
Hmm.
and how understanding that could actually change how you see the divisions, all around us and your own potential within all of that.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
The learner. Have you ever just felt kind of weighed down by those divisions? Like that feeling of being separate from others or like you're stuck in a box created by your circumstances.
Yeah.
This chapter really offers a different perspective. It suggests that those boundaries, those limitations, they might not be as solid as they seem.
I like that.
Yeah.
So let's just jump right into the core idea here, this underlying unity.
Mhm.
So the chapter introduces spirit, and maybe for clarity, we can think of this not really on like a religious sense,
Hmm.
but more as like the fundamental undifferentiated energy or principle,
Yeah.
at the heart of literally everything that exists.
Yeah.
And it's not like just some historical concept, is it?
No, not at all.
It's presented as like this continuous, ever-present reality.
Yeah.
Right? At the very, very core of all being.
Right. Exactly. Precisely.
Okay.
The source material really emphasizes this point that if you look, beneath the surface of all those individual forms, everything that we see,
Right.
whether it's people, objects, or even just, ideas,
Yeah.
there's this like deep essential unity that acts as the foundation for all of it. It's what holds everything together.
That's cool.
So think of it like this. The learner,
Yeah.
what appears separate is actually fundamentally connected at a level that, we don't always see or recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the text puts it this way. The division between one specific form and another has below it a deep essential unity which acts as the supporter of all the several forms of individuality arising out of it.
That makes sense.
Right.
It's like an iceberg, right?
Okay.
You see those individual peaks, sticking up above the water,
Yeah,
but underneath, they're all just part of this same like massive structure.
that's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
I like that.
So this fundamental spirit, the chapter also talks about its limitless nature,
Right.
right? That it can't be confined.
That's a really crucial insight, the learner.
Okay.
The material argues that this spirit, this, fundamental source of everything,
Yeah.
it can't be restricted to any specific part of space.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's kind of intuitive when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
If it's the basis of all reality, it
Yeah.
has to be as boundless as reality itself.
Right.
The very idea of a place where spirit isn't present, it's described as inconceivable. To quote again, it cannot be limited to any one portion of space, but must be limitless as space itself, and that the idea of any portion of space where it is not is inconceivable.
It's true. Yeah, you can't really imagine like an absence of the fundamental stuff that makes up existence. It's
Okay.
like it creates a mental block.
Yeah.
So the chapter then moves into this fascinating area of the infinite as unity.
Yes.
And it brings in a like mathematical principle here, which I found pretty interesting.
I think what's so powerful here is like this logical necessity that the chapter presents.
Okay.
You see, the text explains that the infinite has to be a unity,
Okay.
a single, indivisible whole thing.
Right.
And the reasoning is like you can't have multiple infinites, right?
Yeah.
Because if you did, each one would inherently like define and limit the scope of the other ones, and that would negate their infinitude, you see.
Right. They wouldn't be infinite anymore.
Exactly.
Okay.
And similarly, you can't break the infinite down into parts because division, like splitting it up,
Yeah.
that would destroy its essential oneness.
Yeah, makes sense.
So as the chapter, puts it very clearly, now it is a mathematical truth that the infinite must be a unity. You cannot have two infinites, for then neither would be infinite, each would be limited by the other, nor can you split the infinite up into fractions.
Okay.
So the key takeaway here is that the very concept of infinity, it necessitates this single undivided source.
Okay, that's a really clear way of putting it.
Good.
So if the infinite is, this unified whole,
Right.
how does that relate to us?
Yeah.
Like, as individuals.
Right.
This is where it starts to feel like it could actually change your perspective.
This is where we get to this like really profound question about like how we understand our own being. The learner that the text suggests that if we really want to grasp the innermost principle of our existence, that fundamental source where, our individual identity comes from, we need to look beyond the idea of being completely separate individuals.
Right.
Like we have to move into this understanding of a unified, universal being.
Okay.
Now, I know this might sound like a very abstract idea.
Yeah, I got it.
But the chapter, it emphasizes that, this may appear to be a merely philosophical abstraction, but the student who would produce practical results must realize that these abstract generalizations are the foundation of the practical work he is going to do.
So it's not just like some philosophical thought experiment.
Or not at all.
This has real implications for like how we live and what we can achieve.
Right.
Now, the chapter introduces this crucial point about the whole being present everywhere.
Yeah.
Can you explain why that's such a key idea?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because this unity we're talking about, this single indivisible unit,
Yeah.
the text stresses that wherever it exists at all, the entirety of it has to be present.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
If we start thinking in terms of like parts of this unity,
Yeah.
being in different places,
Yeah.
we've already kind of moved away from the idea of pure unity and into the realm of, multiplicity and separate limited entities.
Okay.
The source explains this really beautifully. Now, the great fact to be recognized about a unity is that because it is a single unit, wherever it is at all, the whole of it must be.
Wow.
This is like a fundamental shift in perspective, the learner.
Okay.
It's moving from seeing the world as like this collection of, fragmented pieces
Right.
to recognizing this underlying wholeness that's fully present everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm getting it.
Good.
So if the infinite is a unity,
Right.
and that entire unity is present everywhere, that kind of naturally leads to the concept of the omnipresence of spirit, right?
Exactly, because spirit is infinite or limitless, it has to be everywhere.
Yeah.
So therefore, the logical conclusion is that the whole of spirit must be present at every single point in space at the same time.
Whoa.
The chapter calls this a fundamental fact of all being. And it also makes this like really important distinction between spirit as idea, which is like absolute, timeless, and spaceless, right,
versus
matter as form, which is, relative and dependent on time and space.
Okay.
As the text very clearly states, because it is infinite or limitless, it is everywhere, and therefore it follows that the whole of spirit must be present at every point in space at the same moment.
Okay, so if the whole spirit is everywhere all the time,
Right.
how does understanding that like impact our potential?
Yeah.
Like as human beings.
Right.
I feel like this is the core of like how we can overcome those perceived limitations.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you, the learner.
Okay.
The chapter argues that recognizing this unity, it's the very basis of conscious spiritual operation. It suggests that as we understand this more and more, this omnipresent unified spirit, our ability to influence the world around us through our thoughts, it grows. The principle here is that, the whole is inherently greater than any of its parts.
Yeah.
So by consciously recognizing this underlying unity, we can, in a sense, focus the entirety of spirit at any point we choose, including within our own individual being.
Right, right.
And this directly relates to overcoming limitations.
How so?
Because if the fundamental reality is unity,
Yeah.
then all those perceived separations and constraints that we experience, they might not be as absolute as they seem.
Interesting.
The knowledge of this interconnectedness, it can really shift your perception of what's possible. It can change how you see things.
So by understanding this inherent unity, we might start to see our own capabilities and the boundaries of what's possible in a completely different light.
Exactly.
It's like tapping into a much larger potential than we previously imagined.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the text, it states this explicitly, the knowledge of this fact regarding spirit is the basis of all conscious spiritual operation, and therefore, in proportion to our increasing recognition of it, our power of producing outward visible results by the action of our thought will grow.
Wow.
So it really makes you think, the learner,
Yeah.
how might this understanding change your perception of your own capabilities and the limitations that you might be accepting, in a world that seems so divided?
Right.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
If the underlying reality is connection, then all those feelings of separation, they might just be illusions that we can learn to see through.
I like that.
Right. It's
Yeah.
powerful stuff.
It is. It is. So finally, the chapter explores the nature of like pure spirit itself,
Yes.
describing it as impersonal intelligence.
Right.
What are the like key aspects of that description?
Well, the chapter defines pure spirit as the fundamental life principle, considered apart from its specific expressions in time and space.
Mm.
So in this abstract sense, it's described as pure, undifferentiated intelligence,
Right.
possessing infinite responsiveness and susceptibility.
Mm.
Its impersonal nature comes from its lack of specific connection to the limitations of time and space.
Okay.
But it's not passive,
Yeah.
because of its inherent intelligence and responsiveness.
Yeah.
The text argues that we can, through our conscious will, impress our recognition of personality upon it. To quote, pure spirit is the life principle considered apart from the matrix in which it takes relation to time and space in a particular form. In this aspect, it is pure intelligence undifferentiated into individuality, a purely impersonal element upon which, by reason of its inherent intelligence and susceptibility, we can impress any recognition of personality that we will.
So it's like a universal intelligent foundation
Hmm.
that while it doesn't have like its own individual consciousness, the way we understand it,
Yeah.
it's incredibly receptive to our intentions and our understanding of its nature.
Right, exactly.
That's pretty profound. And as the chapters suggest,
Hmm.
it comes with a significant responsibility for how we choose to engage with this understanding.
It does. It really encourages us to, to really deeply contemplate the significance of these ideas.
Yeah.
And the responsibility that comes with recognizing this inherent unity and our potential to like interact with this fundamental life principle
Right.
to maybe move beyond the limitations we perceive in a world that's often characterized by, division and separation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a big deal. So,
Right. And here's the thing. This isn't just some, airy-fairy philosophy that's disconnected from our lives. The material actually stresses that this is the foundation for any kind of practical application, any real-world results we want to see.
so how does this infinite unity actually like play out? I mean, where does it go from here?
Well, think about it. If this spirit is truly a unity, a single, indivisible unit, then wherever it exists at all, even a little bit, the whole of it has to be present right there.
Okay, so no fractions of unity floating around. Got it.
Right. It's like trying to have a part of the number. It's just nonsensical. One is complete in itself. And because this originating life principle is infinite, meaning it's everywhere without any limit, the logical conclusion is that the whole of spirit must be present at every single point in space at the same exact time.
Whoa. Okay, that's pretty wild.
It is, right? It really makes you think about, like, what's truly real? The text even goes on to say that spirit is omnipresent in its entirety, everywhere. And the implications of this are, like, huge. It's saying that at any given moment, all of this infinite spirit, all of it, is focused wherever you direct your thought. That's pretty profound, right?
Yeah, I mean, if the entirety of this limitless spirit is right here, right now, wherever I am, doesn't that kind of change how I think about what's possible? Like maybe the limitations I feel aren't actually real, just in my head.
Exactly. If the very essence of the universe is within you, around you, all the time, what does that tell you about your potential? What could you do if you tapped into that?
So you're saying those limitations, those divisions, maybe they're not the ultimate truth.
Right. The source suggests that understanding this unity could actually be the key to breaking free from those limitations. Because remember, the whole is always greater than its parts. If you can connect to that sense of wholeness, of being part of something infinite, then logically, your potential has to expand too. It just makes sense.
And the text even hints that by, consciously recognizing this unity, you can actually concentrate all of that spirit, that infinite potential, into any specific point you choose. And that's a pretty powerful idea.
It is. And it makes you think about, like, the power of intention, right? If you're aligned with this fundamental unity that exists everywhere, then what could you achieve? The source definitely seems to suggest that it's something worth exploring.
Definitely. So if we're talking about this spirit, this unity, what exactly is it? Like, what's its nature?
Well, the text describes it as the life principle, like considered apart from how it shows up in time and space. It's like pure, undifferentiated intelligence. Imagine, like infinite responsiveness, a limitless capacity to be shaped and influenced, kind of like a blank slate of pure potential.
Okay. And it's impersonal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not an individual entity, like with its own thoughts and feelings the way we understand them,
Hmm.
because it exists outside of the constraints of, specific times and places.
Right, right.
It's more like this intelligent, susceptible um, ground of being. And onto that ground, you can impress your own sense of personality and intention through your will, through recognizing your inherent connection to it.
That's pretty amazing. And, it makes me think of some ideas from physics, like how some physicists believe the universe started from one single super unified state.
Oh, interesting. You're talking about like the Big Bang.
Well, yeah. And then something happened, and that perfect unity broke apart, becoming all the forces and particles we see today. It's almost like this idea of the spirit that is this whole unified thing, but then through our perception, it kind of fractured into this world of separate objects and individuals.
That's a really interesting parallel. So you're saying like maybe the initial unified spirit described in the source is kind of like that early undifferentiated state that physicists talk about, and the world we experience with all its divisions is the result of some kind of breaking of that unity.
Yeah. It's like imagine looking through a broken mirror.
A broken mirror.
Yeah. If the underlying reality is this unified, perfect mirror, our current perception might be like seeing that reflection all shattered and broken up. Each shard appears separate, but they're all reflections of the same original image.
I get it. So it's a way to understand how this underlying unity could be perceived as a world of separate things, even though deep down it's still all connected.
Right, and the text makes it clear that it's not literally saying this is exactly how physics works, but it offers a really powerful way to think about our own perception. Like, what if the way we see reality, with all its limitations and separation, is just an incomplete picture? And what if recognizing that underlying unity, like seeing the unbroken mirror, could let us see reality in a less fragmented way?
And maybe, just maybe, that could help us overcome those limitations that we experience. If the divisions are just a distortion, a trick of perception, then understanding that deeper unity might allow us to transcend them.
It's a lot to think about for sure.
It is. But I think the key takeaway from this whole deep dive into the unity of the spirit is that there's this fundamental, infinite, and undivided essence that's the basis for everything. And it's not just some abstract idea. It has huge implications for how we understand ourselves and the reality we live in.
Absolutely. The big takeaways here are the inherent limitlessness of the spirit, its unity, the fact that it's present everywhere, and the potential that comes with understanding that. It can change how we see limitations and the divisions around us.
So as we wrap this up, here's a question for you, the listener, to really ponder. If this infinite and undivided spirit is truly everywhere, always, how could consciously engaging with that reality change your experience? How could it change your own potential? It's definitely worth thinking about the nature of unity and what it could mean for your everyday life.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating concept with some seriously profound implications. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.